Hello, everybody. My name is Cesar Reyes, also pronounced Cesar Reyes, and with me is Elmer Eusman. I'm going to read his brief bio as an introduction. Elmer Eusman received his diploma in book and paper conservation in 1989 from the Dutch National School for Conservation, an independent four-year program now incorporated into the Amsterdam University. After completing his studies, he continued his training at the private conservation studio Corgan and Greca in Paris, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and the British Museum in London. He served as an Andrew Mellon Fellow at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and subsequently worked at the Library of Congress, the Baltimore Museum of Art, and the Boymans Museum in Rotterdam. He returned to the library as a senior paper conservator in 2000 and became the special assistant to the director for preservation in 2004. In 2013, he was appointed as chief of the conservation division, where he currently leads a team of more than 50 specialists responsible for assessing, treating, and housing the library's general and special collections. Elmer is a certified project management professional through the Project Management Institute, PMI. He has presented and published on multiple research topics, including the iron gall ink corrosion and its lateral iron ion migration in paper, aspects of working methods of 18th century Dutch printmaker and publisher Ploos van Amstel, long-term display strategist and associated projects, and chemical reactions taking place at wet-dry interface in paper. He is a National Endowment for the Arts Federal Council on the Arts and the Humanities Council member, and a fellow at the American Institute for Conservation, AIC, where he serves as the treasurer. Elmer, thank you for joining me today.
Sure thing.
Well, I wanted to ask first off is just how did you come to the Library of Congress?
Sure. So I actually was at the Library of Congress for a couple of months in 1994. I had just concluded a 3-year postgraduate fellowship at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And
Wow.
I was there for a couple of months. But it wasn't a permanent position. So I switched and I was 3 years at the Baltimore Museum of Art. I went back to the Netherlands for about 3 years to work in the Boymans Museum. And then there was an opportunity at the library to come back. And so I did. And that was in 2000. And I worked as a conservator. I then subsequently worked as a preservation administrator, sort of the right-hand man to the director for preservation. I was briefly acting chief for the reformatting division. And then finally, I became division chief for the conservation division, or chief conservator. And I've done that since 2013. So yeah, been here now 22 years and a couple of months, I guess. So that's how I came to the library.
Yeah, it's been a while. And like in that time, what have you found to be the most enjoyable or perhaps maybe the most special to you in that time period?
Yeah, I would say far and away, it's the people that work at the library. So it's working in these teams of fellow professionals that makes all the difference. And in fact, that's really what makes me come in every day. It was the case when I still worked hands-on in the lab with a team of professionals to tackle some really challenging conservation projects and really come to a great result, and just gathering everybody's input and come to a consensus how to approach that particular project and then seeing the outcome. And in fact, I revisited some of the outcome and the projects we worked on, they look fantastic. So that was really gratifying. But then moving on to project management, which is a little bit more rigorous and defined, and having to work with different divisions that are not conservation, but facilities and security and the architect of the Capitol, and trying to coordinate these larger efforts was always a real joy. And then now just managing the program, so steering program managers and staff and supporting them in their efforts to do the best job they can do. That's really what makes me going. It's truly an incredible group of people. And I think I'm not the only one that says that. And I know my predecessors in the conservation division have done that, but I also know in other divisions that's exactly the same thing. So that's really by far the most important thing, but I would say it doesn't hurt that we are also able to work on the incredible library collections, and that is true as well. And both those combined I'm very fortunate.
That sounds amazing. I mean, the collaborativeness, the ability to work with some amazing people in the process. I have to say, like, I'm a little bit jealous. I hope I get to be in the same space as you are. I being a junior fellow, I get to work with some amazing people as well. I feel like I'm just getting my foot in the door or in the pond, so to speak, here, and being able to be in touch with some incredible, not only intelligent but passionate individuals in their field. It gives me chills, honestly. Every day I feel like I'm learning something new from somebody, or gleaming like a new talent that they have that just seems like, I don't know, like maybe someday I'll be there as well, being able to do the same stuff.
Well, I hope so too. If that is your passion, then definitely. And also, open invitation to come visit our lab anytime, and you just let us
Hey,
know.
I'm definitely like take you up on that for sure.
Sure thing, of course.
And so you've moved from kind of to this larger role as the division chief, but from where you started to now in the position that you're in, has there been any big surprises that you found, or maybe some differences, obviously, that you've already mentioned between managing much more people versus being in a lab with individuals?
Yeah, that's a funny question actually, because I was thinking, the most surprising thing about the Library of Congress is that I'm still working here. The reason I'm saying that is not maybe
Yeah.
what you think. So I'm a trained fine arts conservator, and
Mm-hmm.
so the library is not necessarily what you would think as somebody for me to be there. I'm not the only one who thinks that. That is
Yeah.
very much a sort of a conservator's mindset.
Mm.
Library and archival conservation is sort of a subset of conservation at large, and so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I never really thought I would stay here as long as I did, but no complaints, right?
Of
So
course, of course.
this has really been an exceptional journey so far. I would also say, um, I'm losing my train of thought.
That's fine.
Yeah, maybe that's the biggest surprise. I like I said, I've talked to other conservators who were also surprised by that, but I think it's probably the people, it's probably the collections. Here's probably what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to say is that the Library of Congress is, of course, not just an ordinary library. It is so
Mm-hmm.
much more, and it has such an extensive exhibition program. And exhibition program, of course, is the bread and butter of museums. So
Mm-hmm.
because we do so much of that here at the library, I think that's another reason why I feel the affinity that I do, and feel that I have the background that I need to at least take care of that portion, or at least make a contribution in that arena. So yeah, um, that is probably by far the biggest surprise. I knew the collections, and I had
Yeah.
worked with people before 2000, like I said, and I knew the people that worked here were exceptional. So that none of that was a surprise. But that I'm still here is interesting. Here's what I really wanted to say is that I had always envisioned that I was going to head up a team in a
Mhm.
conservation department. I just
Yeah.
didn't know it was going to be 50 people.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so usually departments of conservation are, especially when it's a paper conservation lab, is maybe 4, 5, 6 people. That's about it. But so this is a somewhat
Wow.
different scale. But
Hmm.
I'm not complaining. It's been an incredible privilege.
That's amazing. And it does seem like the Library of Congress is part library, part museum, part I don't know, curator of history. It seems like maybe museums are also that, libraries are also that, but on such a larger scale, right? So it seems like there's a lot of different portions of being the People's Library, Congress's library, and in part also museum in collecting and cataloging so many different things and taking care of so many different things. So I can imagine it's uh your portion of it, and managing 50 people kind of has a different view than, say, maybe a cataloger has in their day to day, right? So what in your day to day is your current position like?
Yeah, fair enough question. I will say, with sort of your comparison, I would say the one thing that we're all struggling with is that we do wear so many hats, and
Mm.
we are dealing with an enormous amount of collection material that comes into the library every day. And it's not just through
Wow.
copyright, but it is also gifts and acquisitions, and a lot of a lot of the challenges that we face are a direct result of the volume of material that comes our way. And it's hard, right? It's hard for curatorial officers to make those decisions. What are we going to collect? What are we going to keep? Because what might not be important today might be critically important 10 years from now. So
Oh my
I'm glad
gosh,
I'm not
yes.
I have that responsibility. So that's good.
Sure.
But I would say my job, no, not being hands-on in the lab anymore,
Yeah.
is really a couple of things. The most critical thing I feel is that my staff or my team has all the tools, resources, training, and time
Mm,
to do the work that they need to do. And then
yeah.
I would say another component is to ensure that we provide excellent services to the curatorial offices and
Mm,
meet their preservation and conservation needs. And now that's good for us if we do a good job, because then they will be our advocates and say, conservation is critically important. So this is all
yeah.
not completely selfless. I would say a third component is to guide those same curatorial offices and others like facilities to continuing to be good stewards of our collections. And
Hmm.
so there's many responsibilities that go with these charges, ranging from preparing materials for digitization, for exhibition, monitoring storage environments, working with facilities to optimize those environments, responding to emergencies, recover damaged material. So my
Wow.
work, I would say it's managing progress and projects, which means a lot of communication. I would say that's about 90% of the job.
Yeah.
I think organizing, attending meetings, constant email correspondence, drafting documents, steering management team members and other direct reports, reporting to data calls, or responding, monitoring and reporting the incredible work done by the staff.
Yeah.
That's my day.
Wow. It sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot
Sure,
already.
sure.
And speaking of your staff, I'm curious, as someone who is, I'm kind of stepping into the field of being the Library of Congress. You manage a lot of people, 50 people you already mentioned, and managing so many people. I'm curious, what are some of like the job skills that you find essential in being successful in your division?
Um, Yeah, so I have a range of people, obviously conservators, but
Hmm.
also what we call preservation specialists.
Mm,
I would say preservation specialists have a somewhat broader view of the preservation field. So preservation basically means the preservation of not just the physical manifestation of the artifact, it
hmm.
also means the information that it contains, which is why preservation specialists can also be focused on reformatting or digitization.
Mm, wow.
Um, so that means that goes hand in hand with having, like I said, a sort of a broader view. So having a background in library science, or having a, a, a broad view of patron needs and collection use, in addition to having pretty good range and knowledge in sort of all the adverse effects that collections can be exposed to. So is that use? Is it, bad environment? Is it insects? Is it, can be a whole host of things. Um,
Mm,
so it's a broader combination of skills in that sense. Whereas a conservator, it's probably more honed into um, the artifact itself. So that means
mhm.
chemistry, art history, possibly historic methodology of how things were created. And
Wow.
that of course goes on to the treatment and the hands-on and that sort of stuff. So the, there's a sort of broader and overall view versus a more focused but more constrained view. That's highly simplistic the way I'm sketching it right now, because
Sure.
there's a lot of overlap, and
Yeah.
people, the way I'm defining it right here, there are probably people saying that's blatantly untrue. But this is just how I phrase it for now. Um,
Sure.
Both profession, they need to be excellent communicators, right? Because
Hmm.
we do not do our work in isolation. We really work with all the divisions that I already mentioned. We
Hmm.
have really deep collaborative relationships with security, with the curatorial offices, with the architect capital, because we speak different languages, we come from very different backgrounds, and so
Hmm.
it's not just that you can talk to one another, you also have to hear each other, understand each other,
Oh,
and
wow.
come to a common approach. And I would say we're largely successful in that, and mainly because we all want to do the right thing for the collections. So we sometimes have to take a little bit of a step back, and that is to say preservation is critically important because we want to make sure that the next generation has these collections and can
Right.
enjoy their use. Um, but I would say the primary responsibility of a library, and that includes the Library of Congress, is to make these collections accessible. Do it in a
Yeah,
responsible way, do it in a safe way, but you have to make them accessible. So we
for
have to
sure.
sometimes, take a step back from where we're coming from and making sure we hear those types of considerations. So yeah,
And
I don't know if to answer your question, but there you go.
yeah, it definitely answered my question. I mean, it definitely sounds like communication is key and not
Yep.
working in isolation. And I'm curious, have the priorities of the collection or the priorities of your division changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID, or what now has transpired into the COVID atmosphere now?
Interestingly, for us, not so much actually. So
Okay.
during COVID, conservation staff was actually in the library for for most of this time actually, mainly to make sure that the collections were doing okay. So we would
Yeah.
actually walk the stacks, make sure there were no leaking sprinklers, for instance. So we have
Wow.
buildings with sprinklers, and they never really go off by accident. I mean, it has happened, but
Sure.
there's reasons for why it has happened, and we
Yeah.
respond to those events, by the way. Um,
Wow.
but so we do have, or had, because now we're addressing these types of issues, little areas of little dripping sprinklers. And when that drips on a book, you don't necessarily notice it until there's a real problem and you have mold,
Yeah.
you have wet books. And so in order for us to make sure that we would not be in a situation where that would happen, we walk the stacks and we do inspections. So we do
Yeah.
that fairly regularly. We'd also look at the exhibit spaces, all the objects that are on display, and keep an eye on those. They're not necessarily at great risk, but stuff happens, and so we want to
Yeah.
make sure that. So we were always sort of, still coming on site. So post COVID, there's probably also not too big of a difference because we do a lot of hands-on work, right? We
Mm-hmm.
stabilize material, we house it,
Mm-hmm.
we treat it. You can't do that for during telework. So,
No, you
so
can't at all.
um, right. But that is to say, we have now, this is really nice, we have now more flexibility because we have the IT support that enables telework. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are now able to do a lot of their administration through telework. So they can write reports, like the treatment documentations, for instance, or other
Mm-hmm.
reports,
Mm-hmm.
monthly reports. They can provide draft documents for consulting curatorial offices that might need help or guidance on something. Or they're doing research, which furthers the professional field. And that already has produced some great results. So
Wow.
I would say the majority of time staff is on site,
Yeah,
but they certainly have taken advantage of telework opportunities. And so for us, this has been really great.
that's
I could
phenomenal.
not be happier.
It sounds much more flexible, at least for the reporting part. And then when
Yep.
you want to do the hands-on work, you can do your hands-on work at the Library of Congress, which is
Right. And
wonderful.
so people plan specifically for that. They set the work that requires on-site presence aside and save
That's
that
so
for the days
cool.
that they're there. Yep.
I love that flexibility. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been talking a little bit around some of the materials that you guys are preserving. Can you kind of go into a little bit more detail about like the range of materials that you may have that you've been working with in general? Or the types of
Gosh.
conservators that you have, the types of conservators you have on staff?
Yeah. So there's a lot.
Really?
There's not just a lot in quantity, but also diverse. And so in many ways, we are a museum. So,
Yeah.
um, gosh. Okay. So paper in all its manifestation, from not necessarily a lot of postage stamps, but just in terms of small size to posters and maps that are what we call oversized.
Wow.
So they're sort of a table size. So that's just in terms of format. But then there's a whole range of media that goes with that. It's not just printed, it's also hand colored or flaking paint or all kinds of media problems that come with that.
Whoa.
Um, then we have sort of bound volumes, so books, obviously, but all is again in all its manifestations, from manuscript to like early, illuminated manuscripts from the Middle Ages and early Renaissance days to modern day books. Um, And the conservation division right now does not only take care of what we used to call or still call the special collections. So special
Mm-hmm.
collections are defined as not a book
Okay.
or a book published before 1800. But now we're actually also responsible for the treatment of general and reference collections. So that means books after 1800 also now come to the conservation division. Um, but that's paper and book. And then we have all the photographic material. So photographic material is not just paper, it's also photographic material on metal or on glass. So there's
Whoa.
a whole range of that going on. And there's a lot of research being done there as well, because it's a relatively, well, it's a smaller field than book and paper conservation. And so and one of the newer conservation disciplines, and therefore there's still a lot of research that's done there. But then, and this is why I go like, oh my God, there's so much stuff.
Yeah.
then there's all these pockets of collections that we in the past weren't really able to do anything with. So we have paintings, we have musical instruments, we have the largest flute collection
What?
probably in the world, which include not just wood but also crystal or glass flutes.
Wow. I
We
didn't know that.
have, as you might know, we have the exhibit exploring early Americas, which is mainly a representation of the Kislev collection, which was donated in the early 2000s, which has a lot of pre-Columbian or pre-contact ceramics on
Wow.
display. So we have dozens of these, if not hundreds, of these types of materials. So as a book and a paper conservator or photograph conservator, those folks were always on staff, but we didn't really know what to do with that. So we had contract conservators come in and help us with that. But now, since about half a year, we
Yeah.
have been able to have a objects conservator on staff. So objects conservators, they concentrate their efforts on a wide range of material like metal, glass, ceramics, wood, stuff that we as book, paper, photo don't deal with a lot. So having
Yeah.
that person on staff has been absolutely fantastic. And as soon as curatorial offices heard about that being the case, then all kinds of stuff comes out of the woodwork. so it was another perfect example of we don't know what we have, or we certainly don't know what curatorial offices have. So for a lot of new acquisitions that are not necessarily book and paper, they now go straight to new objects conservator and get their input. It's been a great collaborative effort. So that's been really great. It's a wide range material. I think many museums would be envious of the range of materials and the depth in some of them that we have. So yeah,
I'm
so great to
sure.
work on for sure.
It sounds like your staff especially are constantly surprised by what may come out or what may be at their table that they're working on each day.
Well, I wouldn't say each day. That's not really fair. And I would also say that the curatorial offices have a good handle on what they have. It's just
Sure.
sometimes it's a surprise to us, like, gosh, we did not know. For a long time, we thought that most of the, well, if not all, the photographic material was in the prints and photographs division. But it turns out
Uh-huh.
that there's a good number of pockets in other divisions that we weren't initially aware of. Now we are, and so we're helping those divisions with their photographic collections as well.
That's
Um,
amazing.
but it's millions upon millions of objects. It's a
Yeah.
lot of material, so it's very hard for everybody to have a real handle on everything all the time. So
Right. That's phenomenal. That's so cool. And I kind of love I don't know, it gives me like the mystery or the cool, like, oh, I didn't know we had this. What is this? Like I can start working on this thing now. Like
right.
this is something super interesting and different from what I was expecting to have at our table, or in this division.
Yeah. Now, so that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So because there is usually somebody who knows about a collection, right?
Yeah.
But unless that person notifies somebody else, that knowledge isn't
Right.
known. And so there's a lot of
Right.
knowledge that leaves the building as soon as somebody retires.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
so that's happening. But it's also the fact that one person knows that doesn't mean that somebody else knows this. And
That's
that
it.
person,
Yep.
this is a complete discovery. And then there's
Yes.
stuff that somebody might, I want to say treasure is not the right word, but somebody might recognize something for what it is, and somebody might like, no, this is actually really incredible. So a great
Yeah.
example, we had these 19th century photographic manuals. So around 1850 is when photography really takes off, in the world really, and including the United
Yeah.
States. And so starting the 1860s, 70s, this blossoms into this whole community, and there's a lot of publications, but it's a small world, and so this is relatively rare material. But as I just
Yeah.
said, those types of materials, bound volumes that are published after 1800, are not necessarily, designated as special collections. But now it turns out that this material is exceedingly rare, with real
Oh
samples
my
of
gosh.
photographic material in there, so that we can compare the recipes that are published in those journals with the actual samples that are in there, which then informs our treatment decisions. So,
Oh my gosh.
there's so much.
That is so cool
That's-
though.
yeah.
But it does sound like a lot. And I don't know, I'm curious if speaking of like all these surprises and the time you've been at the Library of Congress, is there any piece or of material or perhaps collection that you found most captivating to you or interesting to you as you've kind of been on this long journey here at the Library of Congress?
Yeah, there's especially when I was in the lab, there's so many things I worked on in the 4 years that were still hands-on. But I'm actually really excited about a new project that,
Mm.
gosh, if I had the time, I really dive into it. But I might have to just nibble at the edges, unfortunately. But I'll share this with you because I think it's pretty exciting.
Sure.
So you might know the Gutenberg Bible. I think most people
Hmm.
know the Gutenberg Bible, and it
Sure.
was printed around roughly 1450. Being the first book published with loose metal type. There's still a lot of questions about how Johannes Gutenberg accomplished this feat.
Mm.
Um, the printing is exceptional. People might know that we always have one of the volumes of the Gutenberg Bibles on display. So one of the projects I work on, as a quick aside, was leading the effort to get a new display case that enables us to have the Gutenberg Bible on permanent display. The Gutenberg
Wow.
Bible at the libraries actually consists of 3 volumes. So we
Oh,
rotate the volume in and out, every so many months. So we do this
sure.
display responsibly, because for conservation usually doesn't really like anything on permanent display. So, but
Hmm.
anyway, so that's
Hmm.
a quick aside. But so the Gutenberg Bible is, for all kinds of reasons, a critically important effort, if you will. What the West maybe does not know, what the Western world does not know, is that on the other side of the world, in Korea, there was a publication of Jigji. And so Jigji is a Buddhist document on Zen teachings. What's
Okay.
exceptional about this particular publication is that it was also published in metal loose type. So we knew that a lot of material was printed with metal blocks, so carved out of wood. But
Uh-huh.
this is actually printed in loose metal type. And this was printed in 1377. So that's about 70 years before Gutenberg. So I did not
What?
know about this, and I don't know that many other people know about this, again, in the
I had no
Western world.
clue. Right.
So I'm part of a small little research team within conservation division. There's 3 of us, and we're working on some of this stuff, but we're part of a larger research consortium with all kinds of institutions all over the world, including Korea. And so we want to do more research in both Gutenberg and into the Jigsaw and those types of materials, and get together and compare results and publish on this. But what we really want to do is raise awareness of these Korean early efforts, and do
Yeah.
comparisons. And then the cherry on the cake is that it turns out, again, yeah, unbelievable. In the library's Asian division, we actually
Oh,
have examples of loose metal type. So we have these tiny little blocks that have loose little, characters on them, that were used for printing. And we had a Korean scholar come
wow.
over about 2, 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
as part of this larger research effort. And
Mm-hmm.
he tentatively established that at least 2 or 3 of this collection of, say, 50 loose type, so 2 or 3 of them are 15th century. So not as early as
It was
1377,
early.
but
Yeah.
definitely within the range of when the Gutenberg Bible was printed. So super exciting to have that. So we're going to
That's
look
so
at that and do
cool.
some analysis and see what we can say about the print and the type and the
Yeah.
um, yeah, this is brand new. So this is all, we're working on this for a couple of
That's
months now. So
phenomenal.
super excited.
That is super exciting. And talk about like the collaboration, talk about communication, talk about the rediscovery perhaps on the Western world's end at least of this. Like I really just have one last question for you then. where can people find the research once it's published, or how can they find more of the materials around the information you just shared at the library?
Right. So this research is brand new. So that's going to be
It's gonna be a while, huh?
25 before
Oh,
anything. And we are planning to publish a book with several essays on these various
okay.
topics. So
Very
that's
cool.
really and there's work to be done there for sure.
Sure.
So a couple of things. I would say if people want to know more about conservation and preservation in general, because it's not just conservation, it's also
Yeah.
preservation services division. It's also research and testing. So research testing
Yeah.
is a division that has a lot of the scientific equipment that can really dive into the analysis and examination of objects. So a lot of our efforts are represented on our dedicated preservation website. So if you Google Library of Congress preservation, you'll get there and
Find it.
to your heart's content. There's all kinds of content there. So that's great.
Oh,
There's
great.
also a library blog on preservation. And I'm now embarrassed to say, but I think it's called Guardians of Memory. So, but
Oh,
again, if you say Library of Congress preservation blog, you'll find it, not a
we'll
problem.
find it.
So those would be sort of getting a sense of what conservation does at the Library of Congress. When it comes to these sort of deeper scholarly articles, yeah, now you get into professional journals that I'm happy to share, but they're highly specific, deep dives
Sure.
into certain aspects of the field, which might not be for everybody. So.
Fair enough. Well, Elmer, it sounds like we're just really getting to like the tippy top of the iceberg of what your whole division takes care of. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. Tell me just the nibbling bits of the corners of everything that happens in your division and the experience of some of your staff. So just thank you so much.
So that was an absolute delight. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care, and we'll talk soon, hopefully.
Sounds good. Oh, and think about the tour.
Oh, definitely, most definitely. I'll take you up on that.
That's good. Take care.